Welcome to another episode of the Scottish Property Podcast. My name's Nick Ponty. I'm here with Stephen Clark. How you doing, my man?
Hello, Nick. How are you?
Today we're talking about, energy performance certificates, EPCs, and how we can help the environment as landlords moving forward.
So this is the thing in the home report that we probably never paid attention to for the last 12 years since I've been out.
Exactly.
It's a bit of paper you dismiss, but it's becoming more and more critical that we kind of understand it. We understand the energy performance of the property that we're buying, purchasing, or even in our portfolio, and what kind of changes we can make to improve it, because there is some tight minimum requirements coming in place in the near future.
Yeah, Scottish Government had it down for April 2021, minimum E for all new tenancies. They've postponed that, probably due to COVID and lockdowns and all the rest of it. But that will be coming, especially now that the Green Party have got in with the SNP and they're in part government as well. So they'll be pushing that through as well, no doubt. So landlords, property investors, it's definitely something that you should be looking at to future-proof your portfolio.
Yep, and we've got an expert on today to talk us through it, isn't he? Talks us through kind of what it is, what we can do to improve it, where the future's going with it, and what legislation's coming in place and how we can conform.
Yeah, for sure. So Jonathan Annan from Harvey, Donaldson, Gibson Surveyors, he joined us for a chat, and I thought it was great. Actually, it was really relevant. We got his views on the future of heating, hot water, how we can fuel our homes as well, which was interesting. And all the EPC stuff as well. So we'll get right into the interview with Jonathan. Here you go. Okay, so welcome to the Scottish Property Podcast. Today we've got Jonathan Annan from Harvey, Donaldson and Gibson. How you doing, Jonathan?
I'm very well, thanks, Nick. Yourself?
Excellent, thank you. We've got Stephen on here as well.
Good, mate. Thanks for joining us today, Jonathan.
No problem at all, Stephen. My pleasure.
So basically, we got you on today because you are out and about, Jonathan, all the time. You're a surveyor, doing home reports, EPCs. EPCs are a thing that I think we need to raise a lot more awareness about in terms of people investing in property, because I think before, I don't know if you're guilty of this as well, Stephen, but before I used to get the home report and the EPC was, well, in fact, I never gave it any time at all. I was going to say it's the last thing that I would look at, but I wouldn't look at it at all, to be quite frank.
Well, I didn't even pay much attention to either. It was a page that got thrown away or not pay attention to, but it's becoming very, very important now, isn't it?
Well, I think obviously with the talk of, the Scottish Government have got their plan of zero emissions by, 2045. And, obviously housing and the sector that we're involved in has got quite a big part to play in this. So I think taking attention of the EPC and how we can be more efficient in the properties and how, gas boilers are going to be ruled out and all the rest of it, this is going to be big and we need to pay a lot more attention. So we're pleased to have Jonathan on the show today to kind of go through a few pointers and things that people can look out for when they're going through their EPCs. But we'll start off just with a quick little background about yourself. Jonathan, can you just give us a little overview of yourself and what you do?
Sure, no problem at all, Nick. So I'm a chartered surveyor and domestic energy assessor, and I'm a residential specialist, so I solely work in residential survey and evaluation, home reports, mortgage valuations, EPCs. That's pretty much exactly what we do. I've been doing this now for nearly 20 years, and the company that I work for, Harvey, Donaldson and Gibson, are based all around Scotland, and that's basically what we do. So yeah, it's my pleasure to come on. I've been kind of working around the area, working now for nearly 12 years in Renfrewshire, but we have sort of people right the way throughout Scotland doing this job.
Cool. So I mean, obviously you do the home report as a whole now. We'll probably go into that in another episode. Today we're going to focus on the EPC certificate. So I think we should just really start right at the basics and just explain what an EPC certificate is, because some people who are starting off in property might not necessarily know. So can you just give us a quick overview of that?
Absolutely. So the EPCs have been around since around 2008, which kind of coincided with the home, a wee bit earlier, but in Scotland 2008, which coincided with the home report. They were first brought in under the European legislation, which is the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, and it's a strange one because it's a certificate, but it's based around software which is fixed. You can't change that. It's a government issued software called RDSAP, or Reduced Data Standard Assessment Procedure. So that it's a set of protocols as to how to measure the energy efficiency of a building. So that's all that EPCs aim to do. They aim to give you a snapshot of the energy efficiency of a building, with a few ratings on the certificate, which kind of try and inform people as to, basically, when you refer to energy efficiency, you're trying to work out how much will it cost you to run the building. That's what they do at present.
Yeah.
They also
Okay,
give you an
look
indication.
into it.
Sorry, say again, Stephen?
And what kind of things do they look into on EPC then? What gets
So, I mean, the EPC is kind of, it's done by a domestic energy assessor, who has to be accredited with a kind of government approved body. So there are reasonably high standards for producing EPCs. It takes a little bit of work to get qualified to do that. Most chartered surveyors who are residential specialists will be domestic energy assessors, and they basically look at the construction of the building, and they look at the existing elements within the building, such as insulation and heating. Then they put all that together into the software, and that then gives them an energy efficiency rating for the property. And basically, the energy efficiency rating will be a bit like if you buy a fridge or a car, and you get a graph from A to G, A being the most efficient and G being the least efficient. And that will give you an indication as a homeowner or tenant or potential property buyer as to how efficient the property is in terms of cost for running the property. There's also another rating which is kind of hidden beneath that, which is the environmental impact rating, which is probably more important now because everybody's focused on carbon emissions. So that then gives you an indication as to how much carbon you'll be emitting as an occupier of that property with a generic use. So the important thing to remember is that obviously Nick may have a 4-bed detached house with 2 kids. I don't know, I'm just guessing, Nick. And obviously your usage will be different to, say, Stephen, who may be living there by himself. So what the EPC can't do is give you an indication as to how you personally will use the property and therefore rate your energy efficiency. It can only give you an indication of what the average homeowner would do. So there's quite a few ambiguities there in terms of what it can and can't do, but generally it's just a snapshot of the energy efficiency of a property, what it costs to run the place.
So see, from a landlord's and an investor's point of view, which a lot of our listeners are, when they're looking through the home report, now obviously there's quite a lot of information in the home report that we can use to kind of get an idea of making an investment decision or deciding whether we want to go for that property. But the EPC itself, is there any information in there that could help us in making a decision about purchasing or whether it would be a good investment, you know?
I think probably the most important thing if you're a landlord is we can go through legislation that's coming down the line in a moment, but the EPC also gives you an indication as to how good your property can be with measures which you can do to it as a property owner or a landlord. So it will always give you what they believe to be the ultimate best rating you can get from that property. So you may find the property, which would be unusual to be fair, you may find it may never ever be a better rating than D or C, for example, but you may find that with some small.
And what are the ratings again? You've got A through to F,
G,
or is there
F? Sorry, A, F, G. G, in fact, G being quite rare. You don't see many at all, to be honest. But G's the absolute worst of the worst. You're basically living in a 14th century castle.
Exactly, or like a farmsteading or something like that. Good enough to keep your cows in, but wouldn't put any tenants in there.
Absolutely.
You can't get mortgages now on a G, can you? On a buy-to-let mortgage.
No, you cannot, Stephen. So that's another feature of this, that the lenders who are very much engaged with the climate change agenda have decided to bring in what they believe to be their minimum standards for mortgage lending, which are based loosely around government legislation. So if you have a property which is rated G, you can still get a mortgage, but you will have to do improvements to the property. You won't be able to get one immediately. There will be some kind of retention on that to have the improvements.
Right. That's an interesting point, actually.
That's interesting. I actually saw a news story recently, which was on like one of the mortgage websites, and it was saying that there's lenders now that are offering special rates to, for properties that are higher EPC ratings.
Aye. It's coming down the line. Absolutely. There's the green finance agenda is definitely very much high on the playbook of the lender. So if your property is more energy efficient, then potentially the rate that you're offered could be better, and indeed the affordability multipliers could be. I don't know. I mean, I'm not an underwriter, but sometimes if somebody looks at affordability of a property and it's very energy efficient, then they may consider that to be more affordable for someone to live in. But also equally, they want to try and achieve a minimum energy efficiency in their mortgage book, which obviously then sort of fits in with what climate change targets
yeah,
are.
and obviously all industries are going to be under pressure now from the kind of government bodies, you know, to try and kind of meet these kind of quotas that they're talking about. So everybody's got to try and play their part, you know.
Certainly do. I think the interesting one was that there was maybe in the past there was a talk of maybe some exemptions of some industries, or you know, they had to meet a certain standard, but now there's no exemptions really by the net zero standard by 2045. So a lot of industries are going, we better get ourselves in gear here, because they're going to have to meet those standards regardless. I don't know what sort of penalties would be like, but they will have to try and meet the standards. So you're talking about concrete, steel, automotive, everything really, you know.
Yeah. So what kind of things could you do kind of cheaply, affordably to increase the EPC rate in your property then?
I mean, that's what an EPC also gives you as a property owner or landlord. It gives you an indication as to the measures you can do, which then tells you how much more energy efficiency your property can be. Just a quick important point, when you're reading an EPC, the energy efficiency measures may say go down from putting low energy light bulbs in to adding solar panels on your roof, and it'll give you a potential rating next to what the measure is. But it's cumulative, so you have to do them all to get to the higher rating. You can't just stick panels up there and get the B rating. If you're a D, you have to do all the different measures, be it insulation, be it low energy lighting, be it better heating. But these probably the sort of the quickest and easiest things, Stephen, would be something like insulation in the loft, low energy light bulbs, a more efficient boiler, potentially changing all the double glazing. The usual more obvious things which you can do to a property.
Mm-hmm. What potential problems do you see here? Because, like, let's take Glasgow, for example. You know, we're dealing a lot with, you know, tenement flats, you know, and the buildings, which are very sort of difficult sometimes to do these improvements. Because if you're talking about, you know, for example, loft insulation would be a good one. It'd be quite straightforward, obviously, if you're a top floor flat. But what if you're a ground floor tenement? Then what sort of thing can you be doing there? I mean, unless you're going to start stripping back all the plasterboard or stripping back to the brickwork and then put in extra insulation, you know, what sort of other things can you do?
Well, you just flip it upside down. You've got underfloor insulation. Most tenements have got a solum you can access. Okay. They're all now crazy. I know, but they're all now robots that people put on the floors to spray insulation. Right. So you can do underfloor insulation in the tenement. You can make sure the double glazing's up to spec. You can change your boiler. If you're in a listed building, for example, with timber sash and case windows, then you can make sure they're draft proof, they're double glazed. Obviously, it's a big expenditure, but there are all ways you can still tackle a tenement. And then further down the line, potentially, is the deeper retrofit of tenements, which is something that it's happening now and again with social landlords, but there are things coming which will be a sort of a tenement handbook almost that allow you to understand what you can do to a property to make sure it's energy efficient. Yeah. I think, Nick, probably if you're looking at tenements, they're not actually as bad as people think in terms of energy efficiency, especially if you're a mid-floor tenement. You can still achieve minimum standards fairly, well, not easily, but you can do it within the realms of possibility of what you can do to any other building, frankly.
Yeah. Can you work on the legislation that's coming in then? Because like a lot of the stuff that was mentioned there to improve the properties, you know, double glazing, sash and case windows and stuff like that, improving, you know, increasing the boiler insulation. These are quite costly kind of improvements that, well, as investors, and me and Nick have kind of touched on that right at the start, we didn't even look at the EPC stuff. So if you're buying a flat based on your kind of purchase price, your end value, your rental income, this is probably a real big factor to kind of put into your calculations right now.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a hot topic, Stephen, in terms of landlords, and the legislation's already in place in England, and so that's happening just now, but the legislation in Scotland hasn't yet been put in place.
So they've got, just in England, they've already got a minimum, is it E?
I think it might be E. It will be changing to D fairly soon. But E, certainly, if you look at lender guidance, then a lot of lenders would expect E to be your minimum viable energy efficiency, the minimum energy efficiency standards.
Yeah. And what's happened with Scotland then?
So it's been kicked down the line with COVID. Unfortunately, as everything has, you know. But one of the most recent publications that I've read was it's called the Draft Heat and Building Strategy. It's part of the Scottish Government's strategy for getting to net zero, and this talks about the reform of the EPC, because they don't think the EPC just now is fit for purpose. So they're looking to reform the EPC to give better information, more robust information for investors, landlords, property owners. Right. So under that, there was a table inserted in that document which gave you an indication of where they're going with the minimum energy efficiency standards. So if you'll permit me to refer to notes, yeah.
Yeah, on you go, mate. No, it's good. On you.
So that indicated that by autumn 2021, which is pretty much around the corner, they would expect all new tenancies to have a minimum energy efficiency rating of D, with a kind of backstopping that by April 2022.
Wow.
So that's it's been brought in fairly rapidly. So what they've not done, the Scottish government, they've not kicked it all down the line. They've simply compressed the requirement, to my view, anyway. And it's ambitious, but it's rightly so ambitious because it's an important area. And then the next step up on that ladder is C by 2025, with a requirement to have in place by 2025 to 2027.
So I can see like a lot of landlords just like pausing this for a second and like looking at their property portfolio and going, whoa, wait a minute, like I've got quite a few E's in there. I might potentially even have an F in there as well. Do you know what I mean? So this is definitely something people should take stock and think what is going to be the plan moving forward. I think we're pretty limited, even though we're talking about 2025 and all that, potentially C. I think we don't have a lot of information from the government and what is it called? The Energy Saving Trust that do all the kind of incentives and stuff like that and funding.
So the Scottish government publish a load of information under these draft strategies, and they're also putting these out to consultation. There isn't anything yet, though, that you can refer to as a landlord and say these are the definite legislations. And to refer back to what Stephen said a moment ago, there will be cost exemptions against the required improvements. So they can't just say to you, right, it has to be C. You've got a listed building, it's impossible, it's really difficult to improve, really costly to improve. Clearly, there'll be some landlords who want to do that, but some who simply can't afford to or just don't want to. And there will be cost exemptions based on how difficult it is to make these measures work for them. I don't know what the cost exemptions are. I know in England and Wales, they're at certain levels, but in Scotland, it'll be probably slightly different. And in order to get around the cost exemptions, they will require a report from a chartered surveyor, chartered building surveyor, chartered architect to say these are the limitations with this building, and therefore the cost exemptions of X and Y are in place for these reasons.
Speaking of these kind of costs as well, is there going to be grants or any kind of government grants available from Scottish government?
There already are. I mean, I don't like to use the word grant, Stephen, because the most recent kind of example of that was the sort of, not the Green Deal, but the next one that the Chancellor done in England and Wales, and it didn't really work. There wasn't really a big take up. People didn't really understand these kind of green home vouchers to do insulation and other things. So in Scotland, it's a slightly different tack. Basically, the government offer landlord loans at no or low interest for these improvements, but there's also potentially a possibility of landlords with vulnerable clients to get measures done under the Warm Homes for Scotland initiative, which will then allow landlords to basically have a tenant in place who is potentially vulnerable or within a certain part of society, and then have measures done to the home as grant assisted work. It's very limited. It's a bit of a narrow one, that one. It's a difficult one to get round. But certainly from the point of view, to my mind, there won't be grants, but there'll be options to finance for very cheap, I think.
It's quite, this kind of industry is always kind of fast changing, and there's always kind of new schemes that come in and out sort of each year. So, if you're listening to this, in the future, then obviously you'll need to go and refresh and see what's available. But I did a flip recently, not recently, it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago in Paisley. It was just a 2-bedroom end terrace house. And basically, I got put in touch with this guy who came out and he assessed the property, and they were offering free loft insulation. So I got the full loft insulated for absolutely free. It was a grant thing. I never paid a penny. So I don't know, that might be...
These things do happen, Nick, and there will be a lot going on with local authorities who are offering under eco obligations, which is an energy company obligation that the energy companies are obliged to try and provide so much funding for the improvement of properties in certain areas. Like if you know Paisley, Gala Hill, there was a huge external wall insulation package rolled out there sort of 4 or 5 years ago, which has improved huge swathes of that area, and a lot of that was free. So whilst they're on something I could put my finger on right now and say that's where you go, I would, if anybody wants advice, and I would recommend to go to Home Energy Scotland. Home Energy Scotland's probably the best location for speaking to advisors and to find out about funding for landlords, because the private rented sector is definitely something the government recognises needing support.
Yeah, I know it's going to be a big task for them to try and squeeze the money out of landlords. That's for sure.
Oh, I can imagine. I still think you should landlords should kind of maybe take a breath though, because it's not all, it's not horrendously onerous making these changes sometimes, and
Aye.
a lot of the time you'll find that the changes that you make will improve the property and improve for your tenants anyway, so it's
Well, that's it. That's it. I mean, you want to obviously, we're trying to provide good homes for both myself and Stephen are pretty responsible that way, and we're trying to provide a good quality accommodation as well. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, absolutely.
And we're also both electric car owners, so we like to do our bit
for the environment.
So
I thought I could see the halos shining above your heads there.
No, I think going back to a couple of things I want to touch on. So first of all, it was like April 2021, I think the Scottish government was like, there was going to be a minimum requirement. And that was for all new tenancies, basically. So if you were reletting your property, then you had to have that. And then basically, like you just touched on there, that got stalled because of COVID. I think another excuse because of COVID. But it was interesting because, like, although we've got, like, in Scotland, we've got the 2045 kind of target, and in England they've got 2050, but yeah, we kind of kicked the ball down the line. So anyway, that's a political thing that will not go. But
it's there is a wee bit of that. If you measure against it in the graph, it's just like, I'll take off 5 years and I'll make it a little bit more onerous.
Exactly.
Forward thinking, and obviously more recently as well, the Scottish government appointed two Green political members into the senior positions within the government. So the agenda is definitely there. It's happening. It's coming fast.
Oh, well, now we've got the Greens involved in government, so the minimum EPC is going to be like, surely that they're going to try and exactly A+. So another thing is a couple of kind of myths that I wanted to clear up. A lot of people get put off flats with electric heating because they perceive them as being poor EPC ratings and stuff like that. But I'm thinking to myself, well, surely this is what we're trying to get towards, because obviously electricity can be generated from renewables and stuff like that. So why would the EPC of a flat with electric heating be downgraded? Do you know anything about that?
Absolutely. So the simplest way to explain that is that gas is cheaper than electricity. So therefore, under the current EPC, for measuring energy efficiency, electricity is always going to give you a poor rating because it's more expensive than gas.
Right.
That's why the EPC is potentially going to be reformed. So the EPC reform is basically, it's out for consultation just now. You can jump on there and give your own opinions as to what you want the EPC to be with the Scottish government. But the reform suggests that the best way to approach this is trying to change the view from energy efficiency to potential energy use. Now, energy use will therefore, it'll give you an indication as to how much energy it will take to heat and keep you warm, warm your home and provide hot water. So therefore, that will then incentivize the use of decarbonised heat, i.e. heat pumps or sort of future thinking electric heating, and it'll also give you energy efficiency ratings, but the energy use rating will be first and foremost. So if you're in a modern house with electric heating, then the rating will probably be different to what it is now. But if you're in an older house with gas, that then also may be different to what it is now, if that makes sense. So the focus now is on energy use, and that will then encourage the use of technology which can decarbonize heat, i.e. electric heating or heat pumps or various different things that they're bringing down the line.
And what's like, I've heard somebody say to me before that you could get your EPC rating up by one level, even if you put in energy efficient light bulbs. Can that be done as well?
Potentially, it'll show you in the EPC what's possible. To be honest, it's difficult to give an answer for every property type. Say generically, yes, change all the light bulbs to low energy light bulbs, but generally speaking, the SAP points which get your ratings up there, the measures that are recommended within an EPC are only there if they increase the SAP rating. So they won't be there if they won't do much to the property. So if you're in a house with low energy light bulbs and it's got 10 apartments in the house, then that may increase the rating. If you're in a flat with 30% low energy light bulbs, it may not even change the rating at all. So it's one that you have to really pay attention to.
I mean, it's definitely affecting my decision. I don't know about anybody else, but I will now look. That'll be one of my points of due diligence, is to look. And usually I'm looking for a D, because at the moment I'm actually wanting to buy properties that are not in need of huge works. So I'm just wanting something that I can rent out, you know, for the next 10 years and not have to worry about it.
Yeah.
And if I bought something that's got an E or an F, and then you're talking there by 2025 that's going to be minimum D, which I can really see happening, then, you know, that's going to cause an issue. So definitely.
You should definitely pay attention to, but equally as well, you know, just read the EPC, because it will give you the measures which can improve what the rating of the property is. So you may find that there's some bargains out there which are lower rated, which with small measures can increase to D or C. In actual fact, Nick, I would say, you know, aspirationally, every property is going to have to be C at some stage.
Yeah.
If you can buy properties that are easy to get to C, or which are already C, then you should, you know, that's potentially something you should consider. But also, I would encourage landlords to make sure that the EPCs are in date. Some EPCs are sitting out there at sort of, you know, 8-10 years old, and the methodology for EPCs has changed over that time frame. So if we've got an older EPC, they may not have the best reference point for where they are just now and where they could be. So I would recommend that EPCs are brought up to date where possible, or even some properties don't have an EPC.
I would imagine that, like, as far as the letting legislation, you know, from a landlord and a letting agent, like I am, like, you know, we have to have an EPC, which is, it can be up to 10 years old, right? 10 years, it needs to be a new one done. But I'd imagine that's going to change as well, because, like you say, you know, 10 years seems to be an awful long time, isn't it? You know,
it certainly is, with the changes in methodology and with the changes in experience of domestic energy assessors as well. So, you know, it was a new qualification back in the day. So potentially some of the EPCs weren't out there with the most accurate ratings. So I'd say for the cost of an EPC, which is really low, to be fair, it's worthwhile getting it brought up to date, just so you know exactly where you stand before you start thinking about any changes to the property.
Yeah, and we usually, I think, cost-wise, just to inform the listeners, I mean, it's usually about, well, I pay, I don't know what the going rate is out there, but I pay about £60 plus VAT or something like that. So
yeah, I wouldn't argue with that.
So
Jonathan, do you know much about the kind of the changes in kind of doing away with gas and heating systems then, and when they're going to come into place?
Aye, so the same document, the draft heating building strategy, it refers to that as well now. Zero emissions heating by 2025. Date to meet the standards 2025 to 2027, and 2028 for all tenancies. That's the potential for, that's what the Scottish Government are thinking about. Now, I think probably that with that will come, hand in hand will come the help to make that happen, to enable landlords to transition, because it's too onerous to say. I mean, there's going to need 2 million homes, you know, retrofitted in some way, shape, or form in Scotland between now and 2045 to achieve this net zero target.
Yeah,
you know, domestic properties make up around about 18% of all emissions, so it's a big chunk.
It's a big chunk.
Is the technology in electric heating there yet, though? Because I mean, I've tried to look into different methods for heating, like, you know, electric boilers and stuff like that. Because some of the tenement flats I was doing in Aberdeen recently, it was more. It was the gas was in the building, but it was more so getting the fluid and scaffolding to get core through granite and stuff like that. So when you started to look into more and more in electric boilers and trying to future-proof the property as well, you know, the costs of installing them, but the costs of running them were a fortune more. And the kind of letting agents feedback that I was getting, saying that if tenants seen electric heating, they'd probably move in for a few months, realise that this is costing us an absolute fortune to run an electric boiler and move out. So obviously it's not very cost effective to allow that.
It certainly isn't. So the best way to think about that, Stephen, is that the government and a lot of the industry, they want to promote the fabric first approach. They want to reduce the demand for energy in a property rather than focus on making it cheaper to have energy in the property.
Yeah, right, makes sense.
Aye, so the drive is to try and make properties more less onerous in terms of energy demand, and then introduce electric heating, which is, although it's expensive, with renewables and, you know, with the ability for electric storage. You've both got electric cars, you know, you've seen the Tesla Powerwalls, which are lovely to have, you know, it's really much it's kind of eco bling at the moment, but these things are definitely coming down the line in terms of, like, you know, storage and more innovative tariffs with electrical companies as well. So although just now it doesn't look as if it's possible, I think going forward you'll see some changes, definitely.
That's good. It's a good point, actually. Yeah, insulating and making the property less onerous to heat, and then obviously focusing on that. That does make a lot of sense, actually. Yeah.
You're talking about the retrofitting process, Jonathan. They're doing a big tenement building in the south side of Glasgow at the moment. Have you seen any? What's that?
Is that in Niddry?
Niddry, aye. Yeah. So I think it's Niddry Road, and I've seen it on the BBC, and they're basically stripping it right back. Do you know what I mean? But it's a huge job, and God knows. I mean, I think obviously they're getting funding from. There'll be like 5 different partners paying for it. Probably Glasgow City Council. There'll be. Southside Housing Association, I think, are involved in it or something as well. So there'll be money coming from all angles, but I think it's really interesting what they're doing with the building,
I think the way you need to look at that is it's like an expo for the future. It's like almost saying this is where we could go, and these are the measures we could introduce to traditional buildings in Scotland. Yeah. I don't feel like every tenement's going to get decanted and stripped back and retrofitted. It's just not going to happen, But what they can do is they can understand how each individual measure impacts the energy use within a building. Yeah. And then they can roll out individual measures which are more effective than just, double glazing or a wee bit more loft insulation.
Yeah, I think they're doing it as a kind of a wider experiment as well, and they'll probably be monitoring it as well, how this can work in the future. What is your, just specifically on the kind of heating and hot water issue that Stephen raised there, what's your view for the future, in terms of, what do you think is going to get installed, or do you think what's going to be accessible to us in terms of doing away with, obviously doing away with gas boilers? We'll have to eventually. What's going to replace, or what do you think the best form of?
I think if you're looking at a straightforward house in an estate in anywhere which has got good access and it's got plenty of space to put these in, I think heat pumps are probably going to be air source heat pumps are probably going to be the sort of workhorse of the change, the charge to decarbonize heat using renewable electricity, etc. I think it's slightly different in built up areas. I don't think it's really understood yet what will happen in terms of how the sort of heating buildings will change. There's potential for sort of low carbon district heating installations going in some places. That could be a sort of mixed bag of that and heat pumps.
What's the cost of a ground source heat pump?
Sorry, Stephen?
What's the rough cost of a ground source heat pump?
Well, ground source is more expensive than air source. Remember, air source takes it from the environment. The ground source has to be bored down to take it from the ground. Yeah. So ground source, you need more space and room. I think it's more efficient. I don't know that much about them, but the ground source is a little bit less common than air source. And an air source heat pump, I think, is potentially between 7,000 and 11,000. I don't know exactly, but I'm sure there'll be some installers which are shouting at the screen saying absolutely not. But that's mine, indicative cost.
No, I think you're about right there. I mean, like, I'll need to have a word with my mum. Actually just got one installed up in Inverness, the air source heat pump. And she says it's absolutely amazing. She's really happy with it so far. Apparently one of the benefits is it keeps everything at a real constant heat. When you've got a gas boiler, it's like you switch it, it's up and down, up and down.
Aye, absolutely. That's what they're trying to avoid. So that's where insulation and all that comes into it as well. You just keep the room temperature something which is comfortable but low. Yeah, constantly.
She was saying there's the initially you have to pay the full whack, which was, I can't remember, like something in the region of 9 or 10 grand or something. Yeah, can't quite remember. But then she says that over a period of time there was government incentives or some sort of funding that she was going to recoup back or something over a period of time.
They're still out there, so there's still renewable heat incentives out there. There's still different sort of government schemes to try and pay back to people who are changing now. I think they're gradually coming down and becoming less kind of attractive to people. And I think the drive will be definitely just to try and encourage people to get it because they should do, frankly, not because they're going to make money off it. There's also a possibility for the use of hydrogen. I mean, my understanding is that potentially that's going to be better for industry, but not domestic heating. Yeah, but I think there's definitely strategies out there for using hydrogen within for heating homes.
You can see, like, all the gas heating engineers out there. Do you know what I mean? It's like you see these headlines when they pick up the paper, and they must think, God, like. I don't think many of them probably realise, but I mean, it's definitely coming, and it wouldn't surprise me now with the Green Party in power that they're really going to ram this through.
100% it is, but I mean, with gas engineers, they're the workforce that they need to retrain. That's all.
Retrain, yeah.
So it's 100% opportunity, I think, for a lot of people, and I think there's the jobs being created off the back of this from the money which has been spent, or something that, you know, not a huge amount of people talk about. And it's about recovering better, isn't it? It's about, after COVID, pumping the money into something that's going to make it better for everyone. So I don't know. There will be losers, clearly. And obviously the gas networks are desperate for hydrogen because they've got all these pipes, which if everybody goes to heat pumps, they'll be like, well, what we're going to do with all this gas, you know, apart from using your hob. So there's a potential for political angles there as well, I think.
But I think there's definitely, you know, they can have all these like dates, you know, like 2045 and all that, but realistically, do you know what I mean? It's probably going to be a much longer process. I mean, I read the paper today and it was like, down in England, I think they had to switch on some of their coal, what do you call it, generators, because, you know, like they didn't have enough generating from wind, you know, because they've had such a you know, not enough wind getting generated, so the coal factories have had to be switched on again.
There will be. I mean, there's still the traditional methods of generating electricity and stuff like that. But I think possibly, you know, the targets will become more defined after what's happening in Glasgow in November, the conference of parties.
COP 26. It's going to be a huge event in Glasgow. I mean, they're talking about basically locking down the whole area within like a 2-mile radius. It's going to be huge security with all the world leaders coming into Glasgow, including like, you know, Biden, the Pope, you know, all that sort of stuff. So God knows what's going to. We didn't get an invite. Scottish Property Podcast didn't get an invite.
I know. I'm offended for you, Nick. I thought you'd be first in line, mate, to be honest.
Raging at that, mate. To be honest, I did actually try and log on to the accreditation website to see if I could get a pass to go down, but nah, it wasn't happening.
There's a ton of things going on outside of COP as well, or on the back of it. So you will see sort of pop-up events in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Inverness, Dundee, all based around what's happening in COP. You know, with different sort of people in the property industry trying to understand what it means for them and try and take advantage of what's coming down the line.
There'll be a lot of business opportunities, like you say, you know, the people who are quick onto this. I mean, we like to do a lot of business on this podcast as well. And, you know, if you can really be at the forefront of this, and, you know, there is already companies doing it, like installing the heat pumps and all that. But I think there's big opportunities for business, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Huge. Absolutely huge, given the number of homes that, if you focus solely on like domestic, the number of homes that are going to have measures implemented to try and meet these standards, there's a huge opportunity, you know. Yeah, absolutely huge.
No problem. Right, so all the listeners, you should basically dig out all your EPCs now, all your properties, and start panicking and see what you can do.
Absolutely. Just a couple of pointers. Get your EPC up to date. Right, that's a no-brainer for the cost of it. Right, get it up to date because it might not be as bad as you think. If you need to take advice, contact a domestic energy assessor, Chartered Surveyor. Any of these people can give you advice on how to make your property more energy efficient, and just keep an eye on what the government's doing in terms of grant assistance and making it easier to lend money for these things. Yeah, it's not all bad, and there will be exemptions in place, so don't worry too much. I think it's probably the best message.
And obviously, that's something that you can help with, Jonathan. And where's the best place for people to reach out yourself?
It certainly is. I mean, what we're doing with some landlords is we're providing a service where we'll go and we'll inspect the property just now. We'll tell them how energy efficient it is. We'll go through the measures which can get them to where they want to go to make the property more energy efficient, and then we can inspect it post-install to give them a most up-to-date EPC. It's basically just a bit of consultancy based around the minimum energy efficiency standards. Drop us an email. Are you okay for me to put the email in? No problem at all.
Yeah, so that's fine.
Jonathan.annan@hdg.co.uk. That's Hotel Delta Golf. And we'll be more than happy to speak to you.
That's great. We'll put that in the show notes as well. And thanks very much for taking the time for explaining all that. It's been brilliant.
Super. Thanks for joining us. It was good.
No problem at all. Nice to speak to you.
Right, guys, so I hope you enjoyed that interview. It's not a very sexy subject, but it's something that's so relevant right now, and something that's going to become more and more relevant as we go forward. But Nick, in a couple of weeks' time, we have the first ever Scottish Property Podcast networking events, don't we?
Yes, I'm really excited for this, but I'm also very nervous as well, because like the thought of actually standing in front of a group of people, like physically in the same room, because we obviously started this podcast during, that was pretty much going into the first lockdown and stuff. We just newly started it, and we haven't really done much of that. I mean, I know you are better, probably, and more versed in it than me because you do your workshops and stuff like that. But yeah, we are doing
You're used to sitting in your boxers and a t-shirt recording this podcast, not going out the house. But you guys, the lucky guys that are near Glasgow, are going to get some airtime with the Nick Ponte on the Wednesday, the 6th of October. So yeah, your one's getting quite a bit of excitement around it. There's a lot of people looking forward to joining the Glasgow one as well, and I'm going to host it with up in Aberdeen. And so yeah, I think
so we're going to kick off with Glasgow and Aberdeen. We're going to do it on the same night.
Wednesday the 6th of October.
Yeah, we're going to be putting that. What we'll do is we'll put a post on the Facebook page, and we'll also put it out to some of our loyal listeners as well, so that they can grab a ticket. It'll probably be on Eventbrite, and look out for that, because we absolutely would love to meet up with some of you, because you've been hugely supportive of the podcast. So it'll be a chance for us to kind of network and actually meet people face to face as well. And Stephen will be sitting at a table signing his autographs as well, signing books. Have you got a book out yet, mate, by the way?
Hi, back a fag packet.
So you get your picture taken with Stephen as well. For all you here.
You're making me nervous about these events.
Mate, honestly. So yeah, we're looking forward to that, and speak to you soon. Thanks very much for listening.
Cheers.